The most satisfying moment of my life was watching Jake's face crumble as I projected every single incriminating Instagram post, comment, and location tag onto the wall during his own birthday party. 3 years of lies exposed in a 15-minute presentation with his entire family, friends, and yes, his other girlfriend, in attendance. I had time-stamped evidence of exactly when and how the cheating began, organized into a color-coded timeline that left no room for denial. My hands were trembling slightly, but my voice remained steady as I clicked through each damning piece of evidence, watching as the color drained from his face with every new revelation. "But that's just her coworker," his mother stammered, still in shock as I highlighted the first appearance of Melissa in his post from exactly 18 months ago. Her voice cracked with disbelief, her perfectly manicured nails gripping the edge of her seat as she desperately tried to find an innocent explanation for what was unfolding before her eyes. I smiled and clicked to the next slide, feeling a strange sense of calm despite the chaos building in the room. Yes, that's what I thought too, until I noticed this. The confidence in my voice surprised even me. Weeks of rehearsing this moment in my bathroom mirror had paid off. The gasps in the room were audible as I zoomed in on what everyone had missed. A reflection in a restaurant window showing them kissing, posted when Jake was supposedly on a business trip in Chicago. The image was slightly blurry, but unmistakable. His hand cradling her face, their lips locked in an intimate moment that he had carelessly shared with the world, hidden in plain sight. And I was just getting started. I had nearly 50 more slides prepared, each more damning than the last. But let me back up and tell you how this all began, how I went from being completely blindsided, a woman so deeply in love she couldn't see the obvious signs, to orchestrating what my friends now call the Instagram reckoning. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my narrative and exposing the truth that had been hidden from me for far too long. 3 years ago, I met Jake at a mutual friend's barbecue on a perfect summer evening. The air was thick with the scent of grilled meat and laughter. Fairy lights strung across the backyard casting a warm glow over everyone's faces. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say, leaning in slightly when I spoke, his hazel eyes never leaving mine. As a digital marketing manager, I was immediately drawn to his creativity. He was a photographer who specialized in architectural shots, but had an impressive Instagram following for his street photography. His phone screen showed 7K followers when he pulled it out to show me his portfolio, a number that made me raise my eyebrows, impressed despite myself. "I love the way you captured the light in this one," I said, pointing to a shot of an abandoned subway station. My finger accidentally brushed his, and I felt a jolt of electricity that I hadn't experienced in years. "Thanks," he replied, his voice soft. "Most people don't notice the details. You have a good eye." He smiled in a way that made me feel like we were the only two people at the party. Our connection was instant, electric, and within 6 months, we were practically living together. I'd leave my toothbrush, then a drawer of clothes, then eventually half my wardrobe migrated to his stylish downtown loft. The transition was so natural that we never even had a formal conversation about moving in together. It just happened, as if we were always meant to share the same space. Jake always had his phone in hand, capturing everything for his growing social media presence. I admired his dedication, even when it meant stopping mid-conversation so he could get the perfect lighting for a cappuccino shot, or making me wait to eat my food while he arranged it just so for his Instagram stories. "Content is king," he'd say with that crooked smile that made my heart skip, running his fingers through his dark hair in a way that made it fall perfectly disheveled. I was so proud to be with someone passionate about their craft that I ignored the warning signs, like how he'd sometimes seem more concerned with documenting our moments than actually experiencing them with me. "Babe, can you move a little to the left? The light is hitting your face weirdly," he'd say, during what I thought were spontaneous, intimate moments. I'd comply, shifting positions, always wanting to be the supportive girlfriend who understood the demands of his growing online presence. The first 2 years were everything I'd ever wanted in a relationship, or so I thought at the time. We traveled together, exploring hidden alleyways in European cities and remote beaches in Thailand, always with his camera capturing every sunset and architectural detail. We supported each other's careers, staying up late to help with presentations or edit photos for a deadline. We even started talking about marriage, hypothetical conversations about ring styles and destination weddings that made my heart swell with hope for our future. His Instagram documented it all: our hikes through national parks, cozy Sunday brunches with my legs draped over his under the table, and nights out with friends where we'd lean into each other, slightly tipsy and completely in love. I featured prominently in his grid, which he once told me was the highest honor a photographer can bestow. I actually believed that line, feeling special every time I'd get the notification that a Jake Ed Creates had tagged me in a post. I'd soak up the comments, relationship goals, and "you guys are perfect together," never suspecting that the carefully curated glimpses into our life were masking something sinister brewing beneath the surface. But you know how you can sense when something shifts? It's rarely one big moment that slaps you in the face with reality. It's the accumulation of small changes that your brain tries to dismiss until it can't anymore, like water dripping on stone, gradually wearing away at your certainty until doubt carves a permanent groove in your mind. Around the 18-month mark of our relationship, I noticed the first drop. The posts featuring me became less frequent. Where I once appeared in every third or fourth post, now weeks would go by without any trace of me on his feed. The captions that once gushed with "my amazing girlfriend" were replaced with generic descriptions of locations or technical details about the shot. When I gently point this out, my stomach already knotting with unease, Jake would roll his eyes and pull me close. "You're overthinking it, babe," he'd say, kissing the top of my head. "My analytics show that my followers respond better to landscapes and street scenes than personal content. It's not about us. It's about growth." His explanation would be accompanied by a screen showing engagement metrics, numbers, and graphs that seemed to support his claim. As someone who understood social media algorithms and worked with them daily, that made perfect sense. I'd nod, feeling silly for even bringing it up, and push down the nagging feeling that something else was happening. After all, I was a professional. I understood the importance of maintaining a brand and audience growth better than most. Who was I to question his strategy when his follower count continued to climb? The first real red flag appeared when I noticed he had started using a secondary Instagram account for his experimental photography. He claimed it was for testing new editing techniques before committing to his main aesthetic, for shots that didn't quite fit his carefully curated grid, but that he still wanted to share. Again, as someone who worked in digital marketing, I understood the strategy of maintaining a consistent brand image. Many of my clients had separate accounts for different purposes. It was a common practice in our industry. "It's just a sandbox for creative play," he explained one evening, his face illuminated by the blue glow of his phone screen. "Nothing worth following, honestly. Just messy drafts and random stuff." I didn't even ask to follow the account. respecting his creative space and feeling proud of myself for being such an understanding partner. After all, I had my own work folders and draft files that I didn't share. Why would his digital sandbox be any different? I was so focused on being the cool girlfriend that I ignored the protective way he angled his screen whenever notifications from this account popped up. What started to bother me, though, was how protective he'd become of his phone overall. Jake, who once would casually ask me to scroll through his photos to pick the best shot for posting while he was driving, now angled his screen away when I sat beside him on the couch. If I entered a room unexpectedly, he'd quickly switch apps or lock his screen, a reflexive action that he tried to disguise as casual, but that made my stomach twist with uncertainty. Password changes became frequent, a new code every couple of weeks, which he'd never tell me unless I explicitly asked. Security measures, he'd explain with a casual shrug that felt rehearsed, too smooth to be spontaneous. You know how many accounts get hacked these days. My livelihood depends on keeping my social media secure. His explanation made logical sense, but the timing felt suspicious, especially when coupled with how quickly he'd enter his passcode, fingers moving in a blur so I couldn't catch the numbers. Once, I jokingly reached for his phone when it dinged with a notification, and he snatched it away with such force that it startled us both. The flash of panic in his eyes lasted only a second before he composed himself, laughing it off. "Sorry, photographer's instinct. Don't touch my equipment," he joked, but his knuckles were white around the device, and the laugh didn't reach his eyes. I nodded and smiled, but something cold settled in my chest that night, a seed of doubt that would eventually grow into a tangled garden of suspicion. The business trips also increased in frequency. As a photographer mainly focused on local architecture, the sudden demand for his work in other cities seemed odd. When I asked about the new clients, his answers were vague. A firm that saw my Chicago Skyline series, or a developer who's working on a new complex in Denver. I'd push for details, and he'd pull out his phone to show me the impressive buildings he'd be shooting, redirecting the conversation to the architecture rather than who exactly was hiring him. His Instagram showed beautiful skylines from Chicago, Denver, and Atlanta during these trips. Perfectly framed shots of iconic buildings, sunrise reflections on glass towers, and moody night scenes of city streets. Who was I to question his growing success? I was supposed to be supportive, encouraging, not suspicious and demanding. "It's amazing how your career is taking off," I said, one evening after he returned from a 3-day trip to Chicago. His Instagram had been filled with stunning shots of the city's famous architecture, posted at all hours of the day and night, suggesting marathon shooting sessions that explained why he hadn't had much time to text or call me during the trip. He looked tired but satisfied when he walked through the door, dropping his camera bag by the entrance and pulling me in for a kiss that tasted like airplane coffee and mint gum. "Yeah, it's been crazy," he replied, not quite meeting my eyes as he unpacked his gear with meticulous care, checking each lens and camera body as if looking for damage that would give him something else to focus on besides this conversation. "This client wants me back next month too." "That's great," I said, trying to sound enthusiastic while fighting the knot forming in my stomach. "Maybe I could come with you next time. I have some vacation days saved up and I've never been to Chicago." I tried to keep my tone light, casual, but I was watching his reaction carefully. His shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly. "Maybe," he said, non-committal. "It's just that these trips are pretty intense. I'm shooting from dawn till way past midnight most days. You'd be bored sitting in the hotel room." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Sure, of course. I understand." That night, As Jake showered, the water running longer than usual, as it always did after his trips, a notification lit up his phone on the nightstand. The blue light pulsed in the dim bedroom, drawing my eye like a beacon. I tried to ignore it, scrolling through my own social media feed, but after the third notification from the same person in less than a minute, curiosity and dread mixed into a cocktail I couldn't resist. I'm not proud of what I did next, but something in my gut pushed me to look, the same instinct that warns you of an approaching storm before the first clouds appear. It was a message from someone named Melissa. Still thinking about last weekend. Your hands are magic. Before I could process this, 2 more messages appeared. Can't wait to see you next month. The hotel you found was perfect. And then, I saved the restaurant receipt for my business expense, like you suggested. Rehearsed. The business trips also increased in frequency. As a photographer mainly focused on local architecture, the sudden demand for his work in other cities seemed odd, but his Instagram showed beautiful skylines from Chicago, Denver, and Atlanta. Who was I to question his growing success? It's amazing how your career is taking off, I said one evening after he returned from a 3-day trip to Chicago. His Instagram had been filled with stunning shots of the city's famous architecture. Yeah, it's been crazy, he replied, not quite meeting my eyes. This client wants me back next month too. That night, as Jake showered, a notification lit up his phone on the nightstand. I'm not proud of what I did next, but something in my gut pushed me to look. It was a message from someone named Melissa. Still thinking about last weekend. Your hands are magic. My heart stopped. I quickly put the phone down as I heard the shower turn off. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with possibilities. Maybe Melissa was a client? Maybe she was referring to his photography skills? But deep down, I knew. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I would investigate, not by confronting Jake or snooping through his private messages, but by meticulously analyzing what was already public, his Instagram account, 3 years of posts, locations, comments, and tags, all available for anyone to see, including me. This is where my marketing background became my superpower. I created a spreadsheet and began documenting everything. When posts were made, where they were geotagged, who was tagged, who commented, and how quickly Jake responded to certain people versus others. I tracked hashtags, caption styles, and even the filters he used. What emerged was a pattern so clear I couldn't believe I'd missed it. But wait, it gets even more interesting. Remember that experimental account I mentioned? One night after Jake had fallen asleep, I decided to search for it. He had never told me the username, but I knew his naming conventions. After trying a few variations, I found it. Jake Unfiltered. It wasn't private, and it wasn't experimental photography. It was a completely parallel life. As I scrolled through this secondary account, my hands trembling, I saw countless photos of Jake with another woman, Melissa, brunette, petite, always smiling at the camera like she was sharing an inside joke with the photographer. The earliest post with her was from exactly 18 months ago, right when I'd noticed the shift in our relationship. The locations matched his business trips. The dates aligned perfectly. There were even some posts made on days when he told me he was shooting late, but his location tags showed he was at restaurants, parks, and once, my heart actually physically hurt when I saw this, at a jewelry store. But I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I did something that required every ounce of self-control I possessed. I continued collecting data. For 2 more months, I documented everything. cross-referencing posts between his accounts, noting inconsistencies in his stories, and even tracking the specific people who commented on both profiles. During this time, I maintained our relationship as if nothing had changed. I smiled through his excuses, kissed him goodbye before his business trips, and double-tapped his carefully curated posts, all while building my case. The most painful discovery came when I realized that many of our friends knew. Some had liked posts on both accounts. A few were even tagged in photos with Jake and Melissa at events I hadn't been invited to. The betrayal extended far beyond just Jake. "How's Jake's project in Denver going?" Our mutual friend Ryan asked me at a happy hour, 3 weeks into my investigation. I took a sip of my drink to hide my expression. "Great. He's been sending me amazing shots." Ryan nodded, a flicker of something, guilt, crossing his face. Later that night, I checked Jake's official Instagram. No Denver posts. But on our Jake So Unfiltered, a photo posted that very day of him and Melissa hiking in the Rocky Mountains, with Ryan tagged along with several other friends. That's when I decided how this would end. Not with a private confrontation that Jake could lie his way out of, not with a simple breakup where he'd control the narrative afterward. No, this needed to be as public as the evidence itself. Jake's 30th birthday was approaching, and he'd been planning a big celebration at his parents' lake house for months. Everyone would be there. Family, friends, colleagues. I had originally offered to create a slideshow of memories for the party. Jake had enthusiastically agreed, giving me the perfect opportunity. "I want it to be a surprise," I told him. "Don't worry about anything." He had no idea just how surprising it would be. The 2 weeks before the party were the hardest. Every kiss felt like acid on my lips. Every "I love you" he said made me want to scream. But I maintained the facade while finalizing my presentation. I had to be strategic about the content. It wasn't enough to show he was with another woman. I needed to prove the timeline, the intentional deception, and the extent of who knew what. I organized it chronologically, starting with happy photos of us, then gradually revealing the emergence of Melissa, the overlapping trips, and finally, the undeniable evidence of their relationship. The day of the party arrived. Jake's parents' lake house was filled with about 50 people, including Melissa, who Jake had introduced to his family as his photography assistant, recently hired to help manage his growing business. She gave me a warm smile when we were introduced, completely unaware of who I really was in Jake's life. After dinner, as planned, Jake's father announced it was time for a special presentation. The lights dimmed, and I connected my laptop to the projector as conversations hushed. "Before we begin," I said, standing before the crowd with a champagne glass in hand, "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate Jake. This presentation is a journey through the past 3 years, as documented on Instagram." Jake beamed at me from his seat of honor. His mother squeezed my shoulder appreciatively as she passed by to get a better view. Melissa sat near the back, looking slightly uncomfortable but smiling politely. The first few slides were exactly what everyone expected, highlights of Jake's work and our relationship. I narrated casually, pointing out memorable trips and achievements. And then, I shifted. Social media is fascinating, isn't it? It shows us exactly what people want us to see. But sometimes, what's most revealing is what's in the background. I clicked to a split-screen image. On the left, a post from Jake's main account showing a Chicago skyline from his hotel room with the caption, "Early morning shoot, day 2. On the right, a post from a Jake Unfiltered showing the exact same view, but with Melissa visible in the reflection of the window, clearly wearing only a sheet. The room went silent. posted within 10 minutes of each other, on a weekend when Jake told me he was alone on a business trip. I continued methodically through my evidence, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. I showed screenshots of contradicting location tags, timestamps proving he was in 2 different stories with 2 different women on the same day, and even a chart tracking the decline of posts featuring me against the rise of posts with Melissa. Jake initially tried to laugh it off, then attempted to interrupt, but his father, face flushed with anger and embarrassment, told him to sit down and take it like a man. Melissa had gone pale, her eyes darting between Jake and me as understanding dawned. The climax of my presentation was a series of side-by-side comparisons. Jake and I at a restaurant in San Francisco. Jake and Melissa at the same restaurant 2 weeks later, sitting at the same table. Jake and I watching a sunset on a beach. Jake and Melissa on the same beach at sunrise. The message was unmistakable. He had been recreating our experiences with her. "And this," I said, clicking to the final slide, "is from 3 days ago." It was a screenshot from Melissa's own Instagram that she had tagged him in. A close-up of her hand with a diamond ring, captioned only with a heart. Jake had commented with a ring emoji and "soon." I turned to face the room, making direct eye contact with Jake, who had gone completely white. "Congratulations on your engagement, Jake. I just thought your fiancé should know she's not the only one." And apparently, I was the only one who didn't know I wasn't the only one. With that, I disconnected my laptop, picked up my bag, and walked toward the door. The silence broke into chaos behind me. Melissa shouting, Jake's parents demanding explanations, friends murmuring in shock or attempting weak defenses. As I reached the door, Jake's mother caught up to me, her eyes brimming with tears. "I had no idea," she whispered, gripping my arm. "He told us you two had broken up months ago but remained friends. He said you were helping with the party as a final gesture." I gently removed her hand. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but not as sorry as I am that I wasted 3 years." Outside, the summer air felt electric against my skin. My phone was already blowing up with messages from people at the party, but I silenced it and drove to the Airbnb I had booked for the night. I had moved my essential belongings out of our apartment, while Jake was location scouting the day before. The aftermath was both exactly what I expected and surprisingly healing. Jake tried everything: tearful apologies, angry accusations that I had humiliated him unnecessarily, and finally, desperate pleas for another chance. Melissa, I heard through mutual friends, had thrown the engagement ring into the lake before leaving the party. Most of our friends chose sides, with the majority reaching out to express their shock and support for me. A few admitted they had suspected something but didn't want to get involved. Those who had actively participated in the deception sent weak justifications. "It wasn't my place to tell you," or "I thought you might have had an arrangement." Ryan, who had asked me about the Denver trip, sent a particularly pathetic message. I didn't know how serious it was with Melissa. "Jake told us you guys were on a break." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. I found a new apartment, threw myself into work, and started therapy to process the betrayal. I even created a private Instagram account just for myself, documenting my healing journey without captions or filters, just honest moments of both struggle and joy. 6 months later, I received a notification that Jake had tagged me in a post. Against my better judgment, I looked. It was a black square with white text. "I'm sorry. You deserved better. I'm getting help." I didn't like it. I didn't comment. But I did feel something shift inside me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release. The investigation that had consumed me had served its purpose. I had exposed the truth, not just to myself, but to everyone who needed to see it. The digital trail that Jake thought was so carefully maintained had become his undoing. Every check-in, every hashtag, every seemingly innocent post had contributed to the evidence. In trying to document a perfect life, he had actually recorded his own deception in meticulous detail. That's the thing about social media. It creates a permanent record. You can delete posts, but screenshots are forever. You can maintain separate accounts, but the internet is more connected than you think. You can craft different narratives for different audiences, but eventually those stories collide. It's been a year since what my therapist calls the Instagram reckoning. I'm dating again, cautiously. I still work in digital marketing, though I've developed a specialty in digital forensics that has proven surprisingly valuable to my agency. Sometimes clients joke that they'd hate to have me investigate their social media presence. I smile and assure them that my skills are reserved for professional purposes now. But the most important lesson I learned wasn't about how to catch someone cheating. It was about trusting that uncomfortable feeling when something seems off, about valuing myself enough to investigate rather than ignore, and about the power of bringing truth to light, no matter how painful the process. As for Jake, his photography business struggled after the incident, but he's posting again. His content has changed, though. Fewer perfectly composed shots, more candid moments. His engagement to Melissa is apparently off, though they still appear in each other's comments occasionally. His experimental account has been deleted, but I'm sure there's another one somewhere. Some people never really change. They just get better at hiding. Me? I've changed completely. I document less, but experience more. I trust my instincts fiercely, and I know exactly how to read between the lines of a carefully curated feed. So here's my advice to anyone who feels that something isn't quite right in their relationship. Pay attention, not just to what's being shown to you, but to what might be deliberately hidden. Sometimes the truth isn't in what's said, but in what's carefully not being said. And remember, in the digital age, there's almost always a trail. You just need to know how to follow it. And if you're the one living a double life, just know that it takes just one person who knows what they're looking for to bring the whole thing crashing down, in the most public way possible. Because screenshots are forever. And so is the satisfaction of watching someone's carefully constructed lies collapse under the weight of their own digital footprint.